Hello, welcome to Enlightning. Thank you so much for joining us today, Eduardo. Oh, I hear an echo. And thank you so much today, guests. I appreciate you. So today we're going to learn about Fluentd and Fluent Bit, and we have Eduardo here to teach us. Eduardo, will you please tell us about yourself?
Hi, Whitney. Yes, my name is Eduardo Silva, a native from Chile, living in Costa Rica, and I have been in the observability space when it was not called observability. So from many years ago, I've been around the CNCF. I'm a project creator and a maintainer. So I'm really happy to be in the show and try to be as much helpful as possible. And
What
thanks
was
for the
it
invitation.
called before it was called observability?
Yes, it was called. I don't know. I had many names, many names. People at that time we used to call it like unified login layer, right? That's all the problem that we know
Ah,
forward, right? It was called after before that login. Some people had this concept of data lakes and many concepts that today
uh-huh.
are very confusing. And now, hey, this is observability, and it's still confusing, but in a different way.
At least
Yeah,
the name of the whole subject isn't confusing.
yeah,
um,
it's all confusing.
One thing I'm so excited to hang out with you this morning because you're a super knowledgeable guy. Tell me a little bit about like what you do and what you're up to and what, uh, yeah, how you came to be an expert in Fluent D and Fluent Bit.
Well, I think that as anything in life, you become, well, I don't call myself an expert, right? People call me
Uh
an
huh.
expert because from what they see.
I can
And,
relate.
and I think, yeah, and I think that as in everything in life is like, I don't know if you remember the first time that you see somebody typing in a terminal on Linux, somebody who's very knowledgeable typing if words really fast, you will say, oh, this guy is really cool, has been doing this, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, but the guy has been typing the same thing for many years, right? It's like a it's like a doctor that goes to a surgery and this is surgery number, I don't know, 4,000,
Uh
right?
huh.
So you will see that this person has a lot of knowledge, has learned how to do things and optimize things over time, right?
Uh
And I
huh.
think that everything that leads to that level of expertise is test and try and fail in the middle.
Uh huh.
So because and this is a really interesting concept because when people try to learn things, they try to say, oh, I want to learn or know like this other person, right? They
Mm-hmm.
focus on the end goal, but they don't look backward what was behind that process to learn, right?
Yeah. Uh huh.
So and I think that in my going back to the main question, and I started in the Fluent team working maybe sorry 10 years ago
Uh huh.
or 12 years ago. I don't remember at this time. And the thing is that let me go a bit back. You know, there's always one problem in the market, right? That applications generates data, right? And but that's not the problem. The main problem is that people want to analyze data, right?
Yeah. Uh
Everybody wants
huh.
to analyze data. You don't care how, right? But it's like, for example, you want to open your bank application in your phone, and you just want to see your statements. You want to see the information that you have in there, and
Yeah.
what and or you want to see some stats, right?
Uh huh.
That is data analysis. You don't think about it, but hey, this is my experience,
Uh
right?
huh.
But to get to that experience, you have to do a bunch of things that are hidden or working behind the scenes, right?
Yeah.
And in our ecosystem, like with applications, nobody wake up every morning and say, "Oh, I want to do logging, I want to do tracing, I want to be really happy as the
No.
cloud expert." It's not like that, right? It's
Uh
like
huh.
somebody needs to analyze data. So, and to analyze data, you need to collect the data, prepare
Uh
the
huh.
data, and send the data to some place that I'm able to see that data, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really simple concept. Everybody thinks about observability as like, oh, collecting, processing, but hey, you just care about to analyze, right? And going backwards, you find, okay, how do I collect the data? Where this data comes from? Doesn't matter if it's logging, tracing, metrics. We don't care about that at this point. It's like, okay, the data comes from multiple sources.
Mhm.
It- For example, and we have firewalls that ship security information. We have mobile applications that talks to backend services that also generates, hey, for example, login information. Or we have embedded devices that also sends information. And this information is not in a central place. But in order to do some analysis, right, historically, the concept has been, hey, let's try to put all this information together in one place so we can consume it, like a book, right? It's pretty much,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like consuming pages and composing a final book. And in observability, I think that one of the challenge, and let me be very clear here. When people talk about observability today, maybe they are referring to the experience that they get with their vendor in the UI. How do I correlate data, right? But inside the
Mm-hmm.
observability space, and this is my own perspective, right? There's a lot of things. And for example, there's the concept of pipelines, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
data pipelines, and then you have backends or storage where you send that information. So collecting, routing, and sending the data many years ago was a really tough process, right? Right. For example, I
Mm-hmm.
told you that data comes from different sources, and if those sources are firewalls that ship messages in a format that is called syslog, or you have a database that writes a log message in another format, and you have 10, 20, 30 services, right? All of them
Mm-hmm.
likely will have a different format. But if you want to do data analysis, in the middle, you need to try to process that information and try to reduce it or come up with some normalization of that information. So you have different sources that you need to come up with a maybe unified format, and then you can send that information to a place where you can do a analysis. Well, and the main problem was like at that time is like we have many type of sources, and Fluentd was
Okay.
created by a fellow colleague at Treasure Data. I think that
Mm-hmm.
was around 2010, 2011. When they jumped into the company, Fluentd was already there, right?
Uh-huh.
And one of the goals of Fluentd was be able to collect, process, and deliver data in a reliable way from multiple sources to multiple destinations. And there's an interesting concept. The really smart thing that Sada Fuji, the creator of Fluentd, he did was like, okay, I'm going to create this tool that started as a POC, right? And
Mm-hmm.
he started writing the tool itself, and this is part of the story. I'm going to mix the concept and the story,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
created this in Ruby language, right?
Okay.
Well, everybody would start like, oh, why Ruby? We have other languages. Well, Treasure Data folks are all from Japan, and Ruby is a Japanese language, and it was really
Ah,
good. And it's really good to create application and service level applications. Yeah, it works, right? And someday, and this is a parenthesis, I asked Sada, hey Sada, why do you wrote Fluentd in Ruby? I don't know if I
uh-huh.
mentioned before at some time, and he told me, oh Eduardo, you know what is the truth? The truth, I wanted to write it in C++. But
Uh-huh.
since I was prototyping the service, right? I wrote it in Ruby because Ruby was a scripting language. It was, you don't need to care about memory management or, C++ is more complex, right? As a language.
Uh-huh.
And I created a core, then I created plugins, and each plugin represents a way to connect to a source, a way to send data to a destination, and I did everything in Ruby, and at some point it was working. So I never wrote the C++ version, so I keep it
Uh-huh.
as a Ruby version, and that
Okay.
was great. And somehow I don't know if you remember, but around 2011, 12, everybody was talking about data. Elasticsearch was kind of in the market already, so you have
Uh-huh.
many Elastic users around,
And
and the way that
for,
go ahead.
for the uninitiated like me, Elasticsearch is a storage, a place to store logs. Is that
Yes,
correct?
Elastic
Okay.
is a company that created a stack with a database that is called Elasticsearch. It's like a backend
Uh-huh.
where you set data and you can store it and visualize it, right?
Uh-huh.
And
Okay.
they have a tool that was called Logstash. And
Mm-hmm.
Logstash was a way to collect data from different sources to send the
Mm-hmm.
data to Elastic. But it was
Okay.
okay, this is a solution for our backend.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing that Fluentd get into the game, it was like, hey, we are kind of a better version that Logstash, but we don't only support Elastic. We support MySQL, we support Amazon S3, we support multiple options. And part of the story is that Fluentd was created to support the company business at that time because it was kind of a Hadoop as a service at the beginning, treasure data.
Mm-hmm.
And Fluentd was the tool that was created for customers to ingest data into the platform.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I have a service, and if you want to ingest data into my platform, hey, just go ahead and use Fluentd. But Sada was well versed in open source for many years. Actually, Fluentd was not his first project. Actually, it was MessagePack. And Fluentd was created as an open source project. Okay, and what happened over
Okay.
time is that people starting to contribute to Fluentd to create connectors to other backends, because the first connector was for treasure data service, right? And somebody provide, hey, I created a connector for Amazon S3, and then somebody
Uh-huh.
created a connector for Elastic and for Kafka and for what today they are like 1,000,
Ah,
right?
cool.
So this
Uh-huh.
small project started to grow like crazy because it was solving one main problem that nobody was focusing at the moment: multiple sources, but multiple destinations, not just one.
Uh-huh.
And today
Oh,
we still have this problem, right? And I'm going to talk about
uh-huh.
that later.
So, okay. Very quickly, I want to say hi to Code with Sean. Hi, Code with Sean. And whoever else is here, please do say hello and where you're from. I love that our community, our cloud native community, is global. So Fluentd, when you say it's created to ingest data, what that means is get data from multiple sources and send it to multiple destinations. Is that correct?
Yes, initially, for example, imagine that you have three customers, and one
Uh-huh.
customer, their data comes from firewalls. The second
Uh-huh.
customer data comes from servers, and the third
Mm-hmm.
customer, a web application, right?
Mm-hmm.
You, and the way to solve that problem before Fluentd was every company was creating their own tool to collect the data for their own data with its own format.
Mm-hmm.
And at
Okay.
some point, Fluentd comes into the game and says, hey, like a framework. Hey, this is a framework. This is are the way that we have to collect data from sources, and this is how you can connect to destinations. And
Mm-hmm.
if you don't have a plugin or a functionality available, you can write your own plugin in Ruby.
Mm-hmm.
You can write it in
Okay.
minutes, right? And everybody was, oh, I'm going to write my plugin. I'm going to write my sources, my filters. Because the first problem that you solve with data in general is to connect point A to point B, right? But then
Mm-hmm.
what you do in the middle is processing. And this is also a critical thing that Fluentd has from the early beginning, that not all log shippers, that as they were called, had at that moment. At that moment, more the tools just, hey, I read and write data to another place. But Fluentd, you could read the data, process
Mm-hmm.
the data. Process means, hey, you know what? I'm going to delete data that doesn't follow this pattern, or I'm going to enrich data. I'm going to add host name, IP address to every single log message. Back in that time, Fluentd was called what was called the Unified Login Layer tool, right? And it was really famous. It was adopted by Google. It was adopted by Twitter at that time, X today, and many companies. Actually, today Fluentd runs, I would say, many places. And I'm just going to jump into the story of Fluent Bit.
So even now, it's still running many places.
Oh yeah, yes.
Uh-huh.
Fluentd is crazy. Okay, and the moment that Fluentd was out, was around, at the same time, the market was shifting. The market, I mean the tech market, was shifting on
Wait,
how to deploy applications. Go ahead. Go ahead.
before you move on, can I make sure I've captured what you say here well? I'll add Ruby. So first of all, observability is about the experience. Like what it is like the end goal of your user being able to see the stats they want to see when they want to see them, right? And so it's about an outcome. And so, but before Fluentd, the problem was there were many different sources, each with their own protocol. There are many different storage backends, each with their own protocol, and every company was like writing their own custom way to integrate these two. So Fluentd was created to standardize. It's a layer between the sources and the sinks that to standardize this communication from one to the other. And it was used an extensible plugin system. It could also process data before it got sent, and it was written in Ruby. You said a couple of times, so I'll capture that. Is there
Yes,
anything I should add about this about Fluentd right now at this point in the story?
yes. And internally, as part of the story, well, a part of context in time,
Uh huh.
Fluentd it was very famous in Japan, right? And with the
Okay.
work that we were doing in Americas, also it got a lot of traction. And at the same time, Kubernetes was created by Google. I'm going to give a bit
Okay.
of context. The CNCF was
Ah.
created, right?
Uh
Linux
huh.
Foundation created the CNCF because Google wanted to, donate this project to the ecosystem. And then, well, a foundation was created. Prometheus joined it. I think that, if I'm not wrong, was Jaeger. I think Fluentd was the fourth project to join because the new movement was like, hey, we're going to start creating microservices. This is the way to orchestrate containers with Kubernetes. Okay, you deploy everything. Now, how do you monitor?
Uh
How do you
huh.
collect the logs? And now the same problem that we used to have with different sources, different formats, it will become a bigger scale with microservices and containers. Docker
Wow.
created the Docker container engine and all the things were
Uh huh.
around. And Fluentd joined the CNCF to be the solution for this biggest problem. And the problem still exists, right? The only thing that happens that solutions evolve to solve the problem at a higher scale in a better way. Yeah, technology in general is not an end; it's always evolving, right? And that's what
It is.
people struggle with, right?
Uh huh.
There's nothing concrete like, oh, this is the best thing of the world. It might be today, but tomorrow, you never know.
Yes. We have a question in chat.
Yeah.
That so is Fluentd competition to open telemetry or works with it? Can I take a stab at this one, Eduardo, and you can tell me if I'm wrong?
Yeah. Actually, I
So
know. I would like to reserve maybe one section to talk about open telemetry, so we can talk
okay.
about the concepts and evolve until open telemetry over time.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So open telemetry exists to standardize the way that data is collected, like telemetry data is collected. So
Yes.
it's more of a standardization than it is a technology in and of itself, is my understanding. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So a lot of technologies like Fluentd and Fluent Bit, even if they were using their own stuff, they're like a lot of projects are going backwards and changing so that they're compatible with the Open Telemetry protocol.
Yes. What open telemetry and maybe what's a quick recap, what it's looking for is to standardize how do we move telemetry data, in the
Hmm.
market. But I want to jump into open telemetry maybe in after Fluent Bit because I want to
Okay.
would like to go over time how things are evolving because you can connect
Okay.
the concept.
Perfect. Uh huh.
Okay. So at the same time that Fluentd was around,
Hmm.
we knew, well, we're going back in your mind to 2012 or 14, everybody was talking about IoT, connected devices, right? That they
Hmm.
were talking about that by 2020 or 2024, this year, our microwaves will be talking to us pretty much.
I don't,
That,
I
that
don't
was
like it
the,
at all.
yeah,
No, thank
we
you.
were like, hey, we're solving this problem with Fluentd, right?
Uh
For
huh.
servers, we will have a more complex problem, right, in the future.
Uh
But
huh.
Fluentd is written in Ruby and might not scale or it's too big for many other use cases where we will need to collect data,
Uh
right?
huh.
And at the same time, we were working on Fluentd, and I raise my hand and say, hey, why we don't create another solution in another language? And was like, maybe we don't have time. hey, baby, we can create it. Oh, we know, let's take a look at it. Okay, I will come up with a POC. And in
Uh-huh.
2 weeks, I come up with the first version of what is called Fluent Bit. And Fluent
Fluent
Bit,
Bit.
yeah, that's where Fluent Bit was born. And Fluent Bit was like a C version of Fluentd. That's how it started. Actually started as a Fluentd, but for embedded Linux devices.
Okay.
Around 2014, we thought we need something more performant, optimized for low memory, low CPU, but high throughput for devices that will be running today, 2024, pretty much, right? And
Mm-hmm.
something really fun happens because it's like Fluentd started by using the architecture and the experience of Fluentd. It was not something that I created from zero. That was all my idea. No, it was nothing like that. It was started
Mm-hmm.
like a Fluentd concepts that were working and things that I saw that were not working, but hey, this might not scale in the future. We try to put all the architectures and changes needed in a new version. And Fluent Bit was created for embedded Linux originally, as I said, but then we wanted that Fluent Bit was not something like Fluent Bit versus Fluentd. We wanted
Mm-hmm.
to, at that time, to have Fluent Bit on the nodes talking to Fluentd, so both can
Mm.
speak the same protocol, right? So people
Mm-hmm.
can have a really good experience around data collection and processing.
Mm-hmm.
Over time, over time, and with the explosion of Kubernetes microservices, applications become more noisy. More noisy becomes like, hey, I used to ship 10 messages per second each application. Now I have thousands,
Yeah.
right? Hey, Fluent, this is not scaling, it's a single process architecture. And that's where Fluentbit came up with a new architecture, event-driven, asynchronous I/O, and many things that in a language that is more low level, you can optimize how do you handle all these resources like memory, network access,
Uh-huh.
working together with the operating system, right? It's very low
Mm-hmm.
level implementations in C with system calls directly. We pretty much wrote everything from scratch. Like, yeah, there's certain things that we consume, but we try to handcraft as much as possible.
So when Fluent Bit evolved, like it started for that to be lighter weight, but it evolved so it could handle a lot more data because between it being a distributed system now, when at first it wasn't designed for that, and then B, just the fact that we're all making an event for every little thing that ever happens to anybody, there's just a lot more data to handle, and so therefore Fluent Bit's more lighter weight and more efficient with resources, it became the go-to to be able to handle all of this. Is that
Yes, yeah. Actually, we were, for example, we were attending this conference, KubeCon. We have been there from the early days,
uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
talking to people that were Fluent users, they said, I think that Fluent is consuming so much memory. Can we use
Uh-huh.
Fluent? This our answer was like, hey, we don't support reading log files. We don't support, Kubernetes filter and all the things that were needed and existed in Fluentd, because in Fluentd was involved Red Hat, Microsoft, Google was contributing to Fluentd, and in Fluentbit it was at that time myself, few other folks, and so it was really hard to. Hey, people is asking to have the next generation of Fluentd, right?
Uh-huh.
And well, the project evolved over time. Both were really well together. Both were art graduated projects in the CNCF, Fluentd and Fluentbit. The exposure has
Mhm.
been always Fluentd. And with Fluentbit, we decided, hey, now it's time to implement all the things that the community is asking for, right? And
Mhm.
it's good to have choices. As you have Fluentd and there are other agents in the market, it's good that the users has option choices and in a
Mhm.
way that they can accommodate for the use case, right? I'm always even with my own vision when building stuff, it's like, hey, let's try to be vendor neutral as much as possible. We
Mhm.
connect with our competitors. If that is going to add some value to the end user, that's a win, right?
Mhm.
So you have to let egos aside. And well, Fluentbit starting to evolve over time. It was a work of many years. And I would say that, yeah, today is a predominant project. Fluent Bit is predominant project in Kubernetes system and cloud providers. And the first
Mm-hmm.
sign of it was 2 or 3 years ago when Microsoft, Google, and AWS, by default, they used Fluentd. Imagine
Mm-hmm.
cloud providers use Fluentd for logs, for log processing, collection and processing, and all of them
Ah.
switched to Fluent Bit. And we noticed that when cloud providers says, "I use this technology," everybody follows,
Mm-hmm.
because to get there
Mm-hmm.
to a production grade, it takes a lot of years. These type of applications are what we call service level applications. It's not like a database which is more complex, but a database to hit the market and be there for production grade, it takes 5-6 years easily, right? And Fluentd went through the same process. And I would say that Fluentd today is the default for cloud native environments. Fluentd is widely used, but all the innovation is happening today in Fluentd. For example, and I'm going to connect shortly with OpenTelemetry. With Fluentd,
Uh-huh.
we start getting this feedback from users that they say, "Hey, you are collecting logs. You are known for logs, but can we collect metrics? Can we collect
Uh-huh.
traces?" And we were like, yeah, why not? So the architecture of Fluentd allows that. So 2 or 3 years ago, we started the first implementation of metrics collection and
Mm-hmm.
processing. And in our mindset of being vendor neutral, we said, hey, this is not about to replace anything. It's about to add value to the user. So, okay, what is the standard in the industry for metrics? And the
Mm-hmm.
answer is Prometheus.
Mm.
Everybody's Prometheus for metrics collection, for metrics storage. And we said, okay, this is perfect. So the first experience of Fluent Bit handling metrics will be connecting to Prometheus and supporting Prometheus format, right? And then, yeah, like a year ago, we started with tracing. So we started
Mm-hmm.
extending the scope of the telemetry signals that we support. Fluentd is only for logs, but Fluentd evolved to have logs, metrics, and traces, and we are planning to add profiling now, which is eBPF. So it becomes a more reliable agent and processor for what users needs, right? Well, Fluentd today is a standard, and now, well, a couple of years ago, OpenTelemetry was created by a couple of vendors. I think that is.
Before we jump to OpenTelemetry, can I get like a nice succinct definition of Fluentd and one of Fluent Bit? Like Fluentd is, what is Fluentd?
Okay, Fluentd is a
Uh-huh.
log collector and processor.
Fluentd is a log collector and processor.
Yes. Well, and
Okay.
you can add vendor neutral, open source, CNCF graduated project, which are the credentials.
uh, open source, CNCF graduated, vendor neutral. Okay. And Fluent Bit.
And Fluent Bit is a lightweight telemetry agent
Oh, is a lightweight
yes, telemetry agent
telemetry agent. Uh-huh.
for logs, metrics, and traces. Today, tomorrow will be profiling, VPF, and many other things.
So I have a question. So we're talking about, and this is probably going to lead you right to OpenTelemetry. So OpenTelemetry is a standardization for how data, telemetry data is defined and distributed and received, like sent, collected, received. And so the value of Fluentd being able to connect all these different systems to one another is now kind of built into the idea of OpenTelemetry, right?
Yes, actually, if in Fluentd, and this is fun,
Uh-huh.
like in 2011, it's like 13 years ago, and we are
Mm-hmm.
going to do a pause on Fluent Bit. Uh, we saw the same problem that OpenTelemetry is solving today, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where instrumentation instrumentation is something that is needed for certain environments. Instrumentation
Mm-hmm.
means a way to modify your application that can talk natively to the log collector or the application that is going to receive the messages.
Mm-hmm.
So we implemented SDKs for many languages that speaks what we call the forward protocol. Forward is a fluent protocol. It's like OTLP
Okay.
today, but we don't have a enforced schema. So we have SDKs
Okay.
for Python, Golang, Ruby, all the languages available. That this is 13 years ago. So we wanted that we were able to collect data locally from different formats, from files, from over the network, but also allow applications to send their telemetry data to us, right? By
Uh-huh.
using our SDK. So
Uh-huh.
that was there through the forward protocol. Now, OpenTelemetry comes from the need to standardize, right? The same thing, but more formally,
Mm-hmm.
how we should instrument our applications. So every application, it's sending the data in the same format. So we don't have the problem that multiple sources, multiple formats, right?
Yeah.
But this is like the starting point to change how things are going to be done in the future, right?
Uh-huh.
No, but what is still the gap? It's like you cannot switch all the industry from one day to other.
Yes.
Actually, for them to change an agent or a log processor for some serious companies that has, I don't know, 100,000 servers, right? Or like banks, financial institutions, for them takes more than a year to do all
Uh-huh.
this. For many of them, doing instrumentation, it's really expensive in time and maintenance over time, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
it's a critical decision. So in our way, if you look at the names of our projects like called Fluent, we aim to be fluent, right? It doesn't matter how the user wants to send the telemetry data. We should be able to speak that language or speak that protocol. And OTLP for Open Telemetry for us
Is that what do you mean?
for example, when Fluent, we get always this question about, hey, Open Telemetry, should I use Fluent Bit or Open Telemetry? And this is an
Uh,
educational part that is missing. Is like, it's not missing, but there's so much marketing and so much noise around it that it's really hard to get the concepts. So Open
okay.
Telemetry is standardization, you know, on how
Mm-hmm.
telemetry data is collected and delivered, and for hence the OTLP protocol.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the OpenTelemetry project has implemented a tool that is similar to Fluentd and Fluent Bit that is called
Mm-hmm.
OpenTelemetry Collector.
Ah, okay. For how telemetry data is collected and what? And
OTLP, that is the protocol.
yes, but like open telemetry is a standardization for how telemetry data is collected and transported.
Yes.
What's the second verb? Transported.
Oh, and delivered. Yeah, because it's OTLP, the same protocol on both sides.
Okay.
And
And this
now
is what uh-huh.
and the OpenTelemetry project has an implementation, because one thing is to have a specification and the other have a software that runs that
Mm-hmm.
specification, right? And they have this tool that is called the Open Telemetry Collector.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
the Open Telemetry Collector,
Yes.
right, is a tool that you can think that is like Fluentd and Fluent Bit, but from the Open
Mm-hmm.
Telemetry project.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are different, for the end user, right, there are different ways to take a look and approach this. For example, from a Fluent Bit perspective, and when our users starting to ask, hey, Open Telemetry is coming, what is your position about it? That's great. I think we need a standardization. So we are going to
Uh-huh.
support TLP in Fluent Bit.
Uh-huh.
And when people say, should I use the Open Telemetry Collector or Fluent Bit? Hey, try it yourself and see which one give you the best experience. For us and the users that still, well, okay, OpenTelemetry handles logs, methods, and traces, and there are other signals coming up supported, same as in today in Fluent Bit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the question is like when you're running at a high scale, right? And if you have, for example, a huge environment with multiple nodes, for this type of tools like Fluentd, Fluentbit, and OpenTelemetry Collector, it's really important how much memory this tool uses, right? How much resources
Mm-hmm.
are needed, right? One thing is an application that processes a couple of messages per second, but when you are in production and a serious
Mm-hmm.
environment, concern. OpenTelemetry Collector has been well known to be very good for tracing, for to process traces. So this is the default implementation. Everybody who does
Mm-hmm.
tracing, OpenTelemetry Collector. OpenTelemetry, the metrics implementation is kind of new in the market where people is still using Prometheus, trying to connect to hotel. I would say that based on feedback from users, it's still kind of optional. There's some migration pattern, but it's, users' choice over time. And after they implemented metrics, they added the support for logs. Okay.
Okay, I'm getting a little bit behind. So we're talking about Open Telemetry Collector versus Fluent Bit. The first point is that they both do a good job, right? It sounds like
Oh
it
yes.
kind of yeah.
No, they're
Um,
all good tools. Yeah.
okay. And then you're saying Fluent Bit and Fluentd and Fluent Bit supports OTLP, but also other protocols too. The Fluentd protocol.
Yeah, so I missed that part. So I didn't correct. Let me correct. Fluentd
Okay.
only supports logs and does not
Okay.
support TLP.
Okay.
I'm not aware about all TLP implementation in Fluentd today.
Is it better
Fluent,
to think about Open
hmm?
Telemetry Collector versus just Fluent Bit and leave out Fluentd from this
Yeah,
conversation?
yes,
Okay.
and this has been and I think that is a fair comparison. There's something that happens in the market every time that a new log processor or agents comes in is new. They always try
Mm-hmm.
to get, it's not open telemetry, I'm talking about others. They always try to say, hey, this is faster than A versus B, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
this is better. Typical benchmark things that happens in social. And everybody talks about Fluentd because it's a primary project today in CNCF, while the industry has moved to Fluent Bit, but they don't compare to Fluent Bit, right? If you talk about the implementation and technical details, Fluent Bit is written in C language. That means that we are very careful about how do we optimize the usage of memory, the throughput, buffering, the safety of the data. There are many years of engineering involved by, I don't know, more than 300 people, right? Over
Mm-hmm.
time and different companies. While Fluentd, yes, if Fluentd, there's not this innovation, there's no support in OTLP today, right? Because it's not suitable for the workloads that we have in the market.
Ah.
Yeah, Fluent Bit it
So,
is.
so okay. So Fluent Bit does support OTLP
Yes.
protocol. Cool. So they both do. Um, we have a comment. First of all, we have some buddies here. Nikos is here. Hello, Fuel Snobble. Welcome, friend. Code with Sean says OpenTelemetry is more like a specification versus a product. Sounds like FluentBit's a product that can work with OpenTelemetry. So that's what I thought before this episode, but what Eduardo just explained to me. So OpenTelemetry Collector is an implementation of the OpenTelemetry specification. So therefore, it does have like a thing that's like an actual thing that's usable. And OpenTelemetry Collector does do something very similar to what Fluent Bit does. So what we're digging into now is like what differentiates the two. So they're both two good tools. They both support OTLP protocol. Um, but Fluent Bit is written to optimize resource consumption. Like it was literally made for edge devices. So that's a reason you might want to use Fluent Bit. It also sounds like Fluent Bit might be a good use case if you're already using a lot of Fluent D. Like if you've already since before open telemetry times, you have all this Fluent D and Fluent Bit ecosystem already going. It would be a good idea then to stay with Fluent Bit. That's as far as we've gotten. There might be more. But how did I do? Did I miss anything, Eduardo?
Oh, you got it perfect. You got it perfect.
Great. That's because you're a good teacher. OTLP. I think the P in OTLP stands for protocol. So this is
Yeah.
OTLP protocol. Yeah, okay. I'll leave it.
Everybody says OTLP protocol, so that's fine. Yeah.
Uh, cool. So when do you want to use open telemetry collector to be fair and balanced in this conversation?
Well, to be honest, I'm not an open telemetry user, so and
Uh-huh.
disclaimer, right? I'm coming from my opinions as a Fluent developer,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Okay, yes.
And yes. So, for example, if you want, okay, this is what I heard from conference because many users talk to us, came to us asking for assistance. I
Mm-hmm.
always tell the users, hey, try it yourself. What works the best for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's good to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, if you're doing a lot of tracing and you need to do tail sampling or processing of traces, OpenTelemetry Collector is really good at it. That's a king
Mm-hmm.
on tracing processing, right?
Okay.
Fluent Bit have those capabilities today. So if you're doing a lot of tracing and you come from open tracing using OpenTelemetry, hey, just go with the hotel collector.
Okay.
Don't waste time. That's the best thing. If you're doing a matrix signal, I think that
Uh-huh.
it depends. I cannot speak for everybody, but hey, the industry runs on Prometheus. Use the hotel collector for that use case if you see that you have one value in it. It's very specific for every person, and right, yeah, it's a feature that is supported, but it will be useful depends on your own use case in your own environment in your own company, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And for logs, you know that the specification for traces, metrics, and logs, they came at different times. So the newest one, well, no, it's not the newest, but latest stable is on logs for OpenTelemetry. It came out, I don't remember the date, but it's the latest one. So as I told you like a minute ago, the implementation to handle, I don't know, thousands of messages per second in a very reliable way with low memory consumption, get to that level of optimization takes time. And I
Uh-huh.
think that the hotel collector for logs, the implementation that they have is not there yet what our users are saying because it's like, hey, I'm processing logs, but it's using more memory, more CPU. And since I run in the cloud, this is more expensive for me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? At the end of the day, it's a matter of cost. This is
Mm-hmm.
not about good or bad. Maybe you have everything on prem, and if it works, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Our intention from a Fluent perspective is always be compatible and as I said, be really vendor agnostic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if hotel works for you, perfect. Use open telemetry collector. That's fine. If you're coming from the Fluent world and you want to solve your case, yeah, let's use Fluent.
Okay. So let me what I'm writing down. So both support OTLP, but Fluent Bit also works with the Fluent ecosystem. And what did you say the name of the Fluent protocol is?
Oh, forward.
Forward?
Forward. Yeah.
FORWARD.
Yes, forward. I don't know why they didn't call it the Fluent protocol. They call it forward. But yeah, it is
um,
what it is.
so the open telemetry collector is better for tracing, you said. Both are good for metrics, depends on your use case. And then Fluent D is better resource consumption for logs.
Fluent Bit. Fluent Bit.
Fluent Bit, yes. I wrote Fluent Bit. My mouse said Fluent D. Sorry about that.
Yeah, for
um,
example, if you take a look what, okay, if you don't, for example, somebody don't believe me, okay, take a look at what cloud providers are doing. For
mhm,
example, AWS and Google, both they use the Open Telemetry Collector for tracing, for traces. But when it's time to logs, they use Fluent Bit,
okay. Uh,
you know?
mhm,
So, and this is fun. For example, Google has this project that is called the Google Ops Agent. This is just one example. And Google Ops Agent, it's like a wrapper, right? And on top of
mhm,
the Google Ops Agent is a wrap, is a software that behind the scenes runs from one side the Open Telemetry Collector and from the other side
mhm.
Fluent. It has both.
So do all of the big three major cloud providers use OTel for tracing and Fluent Bit for logs?
Yes, actually, I know that Fluent Bit is used at AWS, Google, Microsoft, and Oracle. All of them has
Ah,
contributed back to Fluent Bit. And the first way that they start with this is like they start implementing or helping to improve the connectors to their own backends. Backends, I mean, for example, Google has a backend to receive logs, to receive metrics, to receive traces, and they want to make sure that the agent has a really good compatibility with their own backend, right? Hey, if users are using Fluent, I want that Fluent talks to my service because I can get more customers. They're going to pay me for that. Me, I mean, as a vendor, right? They don't pay them for me.
huh.
Yeah,
Um,
Chronosphere is my
do,
employee too. Yeah.
do you know if the big three, uh, plus or minus Oracle, also use OpenTelemetry for traces?
I heard they do. Yes. Well,
Okay.
I think that is the only really strong solution in the market for traces. To be honest.
I'm doing a Jaeger episode next week. So next
Oh, nice.
Thursday, tune in and we'll talk about traces. Yes.
That's a really cool project. I like
Uh,
it.
for traces. Yeah, I can't wait. Although I'm enjoying this moment right now. It's wonderful. So
Oh,
I don't, yeah. Yeah.
we have somebody in the chat that is saying, "Fool's navel, too many options. I want less options." That's cool. So I think you can forget about Fluent D for these use cases. Is Fluent Bit or Hotel Collector? You have to.
Okay, there you go. We just took the options down by one. I think too many options, I want less options is a very common sentiment in the whole cloud native ecosystem right now. It's like we're doing a great job, everyone. Let's less, please, or
Yeah.
help me have opinions. But that's what we're doing here today. So cool. So where would you like to take this next? This was like an important distinction that I wasn't even aware of before this conversation. Um,
Yes, I think that there are other in comparison from Hotel Collector versus Fluent Bit. I think that when you run a project for many years, you have implemented many ways to collect data from multiple sources or send data to multiple destinations. And
uh-huh.
this is, for example, I'm going to talk about this is a personal opinion, okay? And take it as Eduardo's
Exciting.
opinion, and don't feel
Yes.
bad about it. Just hear about it. Fluentd, for example, going to back to Fluentd. Fluentd was written in Ruby language, and the way
Uh-huh.
that plugins or extensions, right, are created are separate folder with different code, and then you have to import those functionality. For example, if you want to run in a container with Fluentd, you have to create your own container and import those packages and create your own image. So the maintenance stuff is in your side, in the user side.
Ah,
And
uh-huh.
when I designed Fluent Bit, I saw the problem, and the problem that we saw was like somebody took Fluentd, they created their own image with their own plugins, their own connectors, and over time they got typical security problems, and they had
Uh-huh.
to take care of the maintenance of that instead of
Yeah.
just updating something. right?
Mm-hmm.
And in Fluent Bit, when I decided on original Fluent Bit, say, okay, this is a problem because it generates fragmentation in the future. And
Mm-hmm.
fragmentation means you are depending on external packages or an external vendor, or maybe you get a version that, hey, somebody built it, you started using it, and nobody else care about it. In
Mm-hmm.
Fluent Bit, we support plugins, but we make sure that all the plugins are bundled inside Fluent Bit. So if you get the newest
Mm.
version of Fluent Bit, you get all the functionality right out of the box, and you don't get fragmentation. This is really important thing. Now we are talking about the stuff that, hey, people take a look at the software, but they didn't think too much about maintenance over time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I don't like from the Open Telemetry Collector, not maintenance, but I will say distribution channel, is like it encourage users to build their own distribution of the hotel collector.
Ah, yeah.
It's, for example,
Mm-hmm.
hotel collector, there's one vanilla version and there's other that's called Contrib, but also, for example, every vendor, like when I want to example is Splunk, AWS, or Google, they have their own version of the hotel collector. But also, if you want, they encourage that to customize your own needs. Hey, go ahead, grab these packages, create your own version of the collector, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really cool experience because you learn a lot. But the moment
Mm-hmm.
you deploy that customized version of code in your environment and you switch
Mm-hmm.
jobs, there's a huge problem for others.
Mm-hmm.
Is really flexible, but also same as the problem that we got in Fluent in the past, it generates fragmentation. So my hope is that hotel folks at some point can come up with a open telemetry collector that comes with a similar experience that Fluent Bit, that is right out of the box, that has less customizations, because in the future, over time, gives you to maintenance problem, a complexity around security patching, and the supply chain of packages in Go, where open telemetry collectors written in Go, it's a bit complex, right? You get the same problem of dependency, security, ownership, licenses, and all that stuff. So I think we solved that problem in Fluent Bit in one way, but exists today in the hotel collector.
Can
Fragmentation
you,
is the ignorance.
this is defragmentation. And will you explain to me one more time? I understood fragmentation, where when you have all the when you put together your plugins in your own custom way, then you're creating something brand new, and therefore that brand new thing needs to be maintained over time. There'll be security issues, updating it to whatever the different components of it, keeping it all current. And so Fluent Bit solves this, but I missed how it solves it.
Oh, the moment that you download or consume Fluent Bit from a container or from a package that we created, right? It comes with all the functionality that you might need right there, right?
So what, so you,
You can create your own external plugins. Okay, for example, okay, let's talk about this. Okay, if you get Fluentd, you don't have, if you use grab Fluentd, you don't have, for example, I don't remember, but for example, you don't have the Amazon S3 connector, which is
uh-huh,
widely used. You have to
uh-huh,
build your own image to have it.
uh-huh.
In the same way with OpenTelemetry Collector, if you want to have X functionality for something, it might not be there and you have to customize it and build your own image and maintain it over time.
Okay.
In
So
Fluent Bit, go ahead, sorry.
with Fluent Bit, popular plugins are already integrated with the image and
Yes,
maintained by the Fluent Bit project.
yes.
Cool.
Actually, maybe I can share the link with you in the private chat.
Yeah, I
It's
can
just
share it to the.
a reference for folks here. It's like, yeah, I'm going to, this is a Fluent Bit source code. Maybe you can share with them.
Okay, I
And
will.
you will find that all our plugins exist in what we call upstream in the main version. Now, the problem that exists with Ruby language and the problem that exists with Golang in general is like you depend on external packages. right? The binary becomes really big. They are not quite well optimized. While in Fluent Bit, we kind of wrote every single connector on our own. So we know what it depends on, we know how it's integrated, and also these connectors are really well performant. And yeah, they work in the same way that FluentBit works with asynchronous IO events. It supports a native implementation of, for example, if you want to connect to an endpoint, use OpenSSL, that's a bunch of code, but we provide a really simple API for plugins developers. So this gets abstracted. All the complexity gets abstracted. So what it pastes on, or what you just paste are all the plugins that we support in the upstream version. I think that they are like 100, right? Between
Mm.
input filters, processors, and everything that you can imagine. So by having less dependencies in Fluent Bit side, you get a container
Mhm.
image that is smaller, that consumes also less memory, runtime is more optimized. And if you get an issue, for example, this week we get a huge security issue in one of our API interfaces of Fluent Bit, and hey, we just ship a new container image, a new packages, we just fixed it. And what happens, like all our users just update the image or the package, and there's no customization involved. Imagine that is the opposite. You're using either Fluentd or the hotel collector, there's a huge security issue, and you are using a customized version. Every single company using a customized version will have to get into the same process that we got.
I follow. I'm writing down the last thing you said though. Complexity is abstracted away. Um, I'm listening and writing at the same time. Sometimes I'm more
And
successful than other times. Uh, I
this is a
was
really good note. Yeah, really good note
Oh
taker.
yeah. Thank you. Nico's asked if I could send the notes somehow. So I have a thread on Twitter. My Twitter is at Wiggity Whitney. I have a thread on Twitter where I post all of like photographs of each board after our session is over. So within the next couple days, I'd say probably by Monday, I'll have a photograph of this board posted in that Twitter thread. But I'm just Whitney Lee on LinkedIn or something, or DM me on Twitter if you want. If you want me to send it to you personally, I'm happy to do it. Complexity is abstracted away. Awesome. What's important? What else is important to know about Fluent Bit?
What is else important? Okay, so many information around talks about connecting sources with destinations, but also the processing capabilities are really important, and is something that that's why they love Fluentbit. Connecting A to
Mm-hmm.
B is really cool, but there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of value when you can process in between A to B in motion.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't have a database, right? We don't have a database. We have buffering, and we have a really good scheduler and everything to deliver data. But
Mm-hmm.
also we have a lot of capabilities to process and enrich logs, metrics, and traces in a very basic way, not like the hotel
Okay.
collector. The other is like we have scripting capabilities.
Yeah, processing. Okay, I'm gonna let you talk before I try to take notes because I don't see the big picture yet. So we have
Okay,
processing capabilities are important. And what did you say are examples of processing capabilities?
yes, yeah, I'm going to use an example, and it's for real life. Like
Okay.
no, I mean, 6 years ago, we were in a KubeCon Europe. I
Uh-huh.
finished the presentation. We were in the Fluentd booth at that time. And I don't know, this was when GDPR, no GDPR. I remember, how was that? GDPR. I always can get confused with this enforcement for security on how do you
Uh-huh.
manage your information technology. GDPR, sorry,
Uh-huh.
GDPR. So, like 7 folks approached to me, right? Like in front of me was like, what do you need? Hey, it said, we have a problem. You need the help. Okay. What is the problem? Yeah, we need to process the logs because we are processing our application, receive the transaction, and they are doing purchasing. So, and purchasing, and they store the credit card numbers, right? So
Ah,
we need to
uh-huh,
store the credit card numbers in the record, but also we
uh-huh,
need to send information to another place where it's being to processed to be analyzed. But the problem that
uh-huh.
we have that since GDPR is coming, it's like a regulation in Europe, right?
Yeah,
We need to obfuscate or remove those credit card numbers from the records
uh-huh.
before send the information out. It was cool. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
hey, but we can use one of our filters that we have. It will work great. Oh, yes, but we have the next complexity. And they said,
Mm-hmm.
if the transaction number is from an American Express card, we have to
Mm-hmm.
send the information to one place and obfuscate the data in one way that is different if it was Visa or MasterCard.
Ah,
Like, okay, and if you abstract from that requirement, it's like they don't want to do just processing. They want to be able to bring the business logic into the data pipeline.
ah,
So if I have this, I want to do XYZ. If I want to do the other, I want to do the other thing. And my
ah,
answer is like, oh, you can write a filter in C language. And they say, oh, we don't, it's too complex, right? Yeah, it's too complex.
uh-huh.
And we come up with the idea together, hey, why we don't implement a scripting language that users from a configuration perspective can build their own rules, their own stuff.
Ah.
And we come up with the first implementation of a filter that use the Lua language, Lua.
So did Fluent Bit create the Lua language?
Oh, no, no, no. The Lua
No,
language
created the
was
filter.
created in Brazil by the PUC, I think, University. It's a really cool language. Actually, where it's used a lot, well, for folks in IT, if you take a look at Lua, exists, I don't know, do you know the Roblox platform to play games online?
Oh,
Roblox. Have you heard about it?
it's it feels familiar. It's online though? I'm
Yeah,
thinking of
yeah. So Roblox.
mm,
So
no.
Roblox, my kids used to play Roblox. It's like a website where you have a lot of games online,
Uh-huh.
but the value you can create your own games in Lua because Lua is a really easy language.
Ah, cool.
And also before that, who supports Lua in a configuration. I don't know if you are familiar with the Nginx web server.
Mm-hmm. I'm familiar with it, yes.
Okay, so most of folks that used to do operations and manage web servers that serve pages said, hey, I need to have a custom logic. If somebody asks for this address, I need to deliver this content or otherwise this other content and have very custom logic, maybe based on IP address, the resources that they want to access, and all of that stuff. And they did it by implementing Lua inside the configuration. So the user
Ah,
who's not a developer, but who's operating the service, they can add a lot of custom logic on top of it. So to solve
mm-hmm.
this problem for these folks from Europe, yeah, we implemented Lua
Mm-hmm.
in Fluent as a filter. So you can add a Lua code in your configuration file, and then you have a filter working with your own business logic.
So companies can add Lua code to their configuration file, to their data pipeline, to their what's a yeah.
Yeah, so what Fluent Bit does when you create an input, you create a source and some processor, that's pretty much a pipeline. That's a pipeline, right?
Okay.
But by having Lua and other filters, you allow users to bring business logic or their own custom needs be solved in the data pipeline, right? What
Yeah.
users used to do before, they send everything, for example, to a database, for example, Splunk, and they do analytics or they run their own special queries to come up with the same type of solution. Now you can do the same thing, but inside the pipeline. And actually, one of the capabilities, well, and this is one of the biggest things here, since Fluent Bit is very lightweight, people deploy
Uh-huh.
Fluent Bit everywhere. So today, Fluent Bit is deployed in cars, it's deployed in embedded devices, it's deployed all Kubernetes services. Fluent Bit sits on what we call the edge, right? You can deploy it on the
Mm-hmm.
edge. The edge, for our perspective, the edge is where the data is being generated. It could be a VM, it could be a bare metal server, right? And since you have this little lightweight agent that is really
Mm-hmm.
powerful, you can process the data in every single node before sending the data. Now, before that, for example, in the old-fashioned model, imagine that you have 100 servers. Okay, what they used to do was to send the data from these 100 servers to a central point for data analysis, and then do processing, analysis, and everything like that. Now, imagine that before sending the data, you can do this processing inside each box in a very lightweight mode. It's like a
Cool.
distributed processing. You don't do the processing at the end. Maybe you can do some stuff, but here you can, everyone will do it in a very lightweight mode, and that is the biggest value.
So does it enable distributed processing, or is this naturally distributed processing as is?
Since
It is.
users deploy Fluent Bit on every node, it becomes like a
Uh-huh.
native thing. It's not like a Fluent Bit is talking to each other. It's like, hey, I'm Fluent Bit, I'm sitting on this node, I'm processing data, and my user wrote some Lua script or some process filters, and they say, hey, I'm enriching, dropping data, doing a lot of processing before sending the data. So if you
Okay.
look at for the big picture, that's a huge win, right?
Uh-huh.
Because you're reducing the overhead that you used to do with processing once you used to centralize data in one server.
So the distributed processing is independent of the Lua language. Um, that's just
With
something
Lua,
no matter which Fluent B filter you're using, you're doing distributed processing.
yeah,
Yeah?
you can do it.
Okay,
And
cool.
actually, remember that each Fluent D or Fluent Bit can talk to each other. So what you can do is to have, I don't know, 100 Fluent Bits working independently and send the data to a single Fluent Bit. And that Fluent Bit maybe do another thing and sends data out to backends.
Um, Not to beat a dead horse, but does the open telemetry collector run on every node? Like, does it also do distributed processing?
Yes, you can do it too.
Okay, cool.
However, remember that is really expensive on memory and CPU.
Ah, yes, yes, yes. And Fluent D and Fluent Bit run on every node, like one or the other,
Oh, people
or
used to
are
run
they?
Fluent D.
Uh-huh.
No, yeah, people used to run Fluent D on every node. For example, Fluent D on the nodes, and then you have Fluent D as a central point where all the Fluent Ds are talking to each other.
Uh-huh.
Okay, like a centralization. And now, then after a few years, people started to do Fluent Bit to Fluent D.
Uh-huh.
And now they do either Fluent Bit directly to the backend or Fluent Bit to another Fluent Bit.
Okay. So Fluent Bit runs as a daemon set, it sounds like, on each node. Is that
Yeah,
true?
in Kubernetes, yep,
That's a
yeah.
okay. And then depending on how you're hooking your system up, it could send your data directly to the back end, or it might have a centralized version of the Fluent Bit that's doing centralized collecting before it goes out somewhere else. Is
Yes,
that correct?
and actually that depends on the use case. For example, I remember we were talking to Apple many years ago, and
Uh-huh.
we want them to run Fluent Bit on the edge nodes and centralize on Fluent Bit, and from there to their own backend. I think that the series team at that time was using Fluent D or Fluent Bit. They're still using it heavily. And they told us, hey, why do you want us to centralize the data in another agent? Our network is really fast, and we have a cool tech, right? They're tech guys.
Uh-huh.
And their use case that they have the edge nodes talking directly to the backends. They skip this
It-
central point of processing.
Uh-huh.
They do the
Wow.
processing and then send data directly to the backend.
Cool. So, do we have anything else we want to say about Fluent Bit's processing capabilities?
Yes, well, maybe it's an update for everybody. And I think in the recent months, last KubeCons, we gave some updates about architecture of Fluent Bit. Used to be a single process service, but today is multi-threading. That's multi-threading, scale up to 100,000
Oh.
messages per second and again in a very lightweight mode. Also, if
Multi.
people want to, if you're still going to the path of full customization of Fluent Bit,
Mm-hmm.
you want to write your own plugins, external plugins, yeah, that's fine. We support that. You can write plugins in Go, input and output in Go. You can write inputs and filters in Wasm, and with Wasm you can enable Python, Rust, and others.
Um, I have questions about that. So a plugin is different from a filter. When we're talking about processing, we're talking about a filter. When we're talking about a plugin, we're talking about how to integrate the various sources and backends. Is that correct?
Yes, a plugin for us is an extension of the core functionality, and we have categories.
Mm-hmm.
Today in Fluent Bit, I don't know if we have another whiteboard, no blackboard. We got
Nope, just this one. That's why we have to.
oh, yeah. Okay, let's try to optimize the space. So
Okay.
we have plugins has categories today. They're
Uh-huh.
either what we call input, processor,
Uh-huh.
filter, or output. Those are the categories
Input,
of
processor, filter, or output.
yeah. Input is an extension that allows to read data. For example, we have an input plugin to read log files. We have others to read from systemd, other to receive messages from syslog over the network. Those are different input plugins. And yeah, for
Okay.
authors of this presentation, yeah, they can take a look at the link that we just shared on the chat and you just shared, so they can get an idea of what it is. So after you collect the data, okay, imagine that you're from left to right.
Just you can write your own plugin and Go as a WASM module. And did you say there was a third thing?
Oh yeah, yeah. You can do input and output in Go. You can do filters in Lua.
Lua. Uh-huh. And also
Yeah,
it's WASM.
Wasm. Yeah, and with
Cool.
Wasm enables you other languages. Yeah, Wasm is like a framework to run other languages.
WASM, yeah, optimized for web browsers. Run whatever. It's web browsers
Now it's
aren't
the
just for
backend.
JavaScript anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, we run now backend. Sorry, browser technologies in the backend, right? I'm not a fan of those technologies. I think that Wasm still needs to evolve a bit more for our
Uh-huh.
use case, right? Our use case is
Okay.
very data computing intensive, running 24/7. So it's a different thing. Okay, so if you do a mental map, you have something in the left that is all the data collection where you collect the data.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
to extend a new data collection type, you create an input plugin. That's it. But as of today, you are covered for pretty much everything that exists. After you, I'm going to give you the first design and then the second. The first one is about the inputs field plugins that collects data. Then you have the filters, and filters allows you to, well, maybe filters a bad name, but anyway, so we're full of bad name. Filters allows you to drop data, modify the data, or just drop data, right? While it's in motion, it's kind of in the middle.
Okay.
And filters are another type of plugins, right? It's
Okay.
another category.
Uh-huh.
And on the right, you have the output. The output plugins that knows how to connect to Google. They know how to connect to AWS, to Redis, to MySQL, to any type of or Splunk database where you are going to send the data.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when you write a plugin, yeah, it could be in C, Go, Wasm. You're going to say, I'm going to write a plugin for an input type plugin, an output, or a filter.
Makes
Now,
sense.
this year we introduced the concept of processors, right?
Okay.
Processors are the
I have a quick question. Is this a good
feature.
use of my last bit of whiteboard space? Should I jot this down? Or is there something else you envision for this?
I think this is a really interesting topic that as a concept, and maybe you can draw, the balls, source, arrow,
Cool.
processing, arrow.
Yeah. And then the processor is using CPU and memory that's on the node itself.
Yes, let me give you first how the pipeline works. So we
Okay.
have input, filters, output.
Mm-hmm.
Input, filters, output. Now
Mm-hmm.
we introduce the concept of processors. Okay, I described it.
Mm-hmm.
Input allows you to collect data from different sources.
Mm-hmm.
Filters allow you to modify, drop, or enrich your data. And
Mm-hmm.
output allows you to send this information, know how to connect and format the data for a backend, Splunk, Elastic, OpenSearch, AWS, S3, or anything where you're sending the data. Okay, and you write a plugin as an output, as an input, or as a filter in case you want to extend this. It's a pluggable
Mm-hmm.
architecture. Okay, now the concept of processors is new because in the recent years, Fluent Bit got multi-threading capabilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
As a single thread, it was able to process 1,000 messages per second, but
Mm-hmm.
here companies are generating 20, 30% more logs, and they're saying,
Yeah.
hey, it's something faster, right? And you
Uh-huh.
need to with new implementations or new way to support that workload. That really, really intensive. Yeah, everybody's moving to microservices now, so this is insane. Okay, and with process, so the problem with filters in the past is like filters runs in what we call a thread. So all input plugins were sending to a main thread where all that thread was doing processing, but also was doing scheduling, retries, buffering, many things. And it becomes the bottleneck for many intensive workloads. So what
Mm-hmm.
we did was the concept of processors. That processor happens right after the input plugin collects the data. There's no
Okay.
routing input and filter. There's now input processing, and then optionally can go to a filter. The,
Uh-huh.
the, the cool thing is like you can run a filter as a processor. And what is the value? Is that this processor, well, this filter as a processor will run in a separate thread. And
Okay.
since it runs a separate thread, likely that runs in a different CPU core, right? And if you have, well, everybody has a multi-core CPU system. I think that my phone has like a 4 cores, right? Too, right? So you can take advantage of the resources that you have in your computer, right?
I have a
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
Why is there a reason you want to use a filter now that a processor exists, or as a processor, could it replace a filter?
I think that eventually processors are designed to replace filters, and
Okay.
and there are other optimizations that we did in processors that in the way that we manage the data internally is
Mm-hmm.
optimized for performant capabilities, right? So
Okay.
filters are more heavyweight when processing data, even that they're faster than everything else on other agents that exist today. Our
Mm-hmm.
users are very demanding. So we're going beyond that and looking for ways to, yeah, that's why we come out with processors. And yeah,
Okay.
so if you run a filter as a processor, yeah, it runs in a separate thread, but pretty much it helps you. But if you use the new processors to modify the data, it will be even faster.
Mhm.
Faster and less CPU cycles, less memory usage, and all of that.
So processors new. Is that correct? Did output stay all the way on the board? I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah. Input, processor, filter, output. And the filter, I guess, has become optional, but there are a zillion of them, I'm sure, in use right now.
Yeah.
So the input is one or many sources. I'll just write sources. The processor is performance filtering, basically.
Yes.
uh, Sources, processor, um, new, uh, performance filtering. And this is filters, then filter, old. And then output, I guess syncs is the data way to say that. Storage,
Oh,
backend.
yeah. The output knows how to connect to backends, that because the output, the work is to format the data and connect to a backend service to send the data. So many of our users are Splunk users, Elastic users, Amazon S3 users.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's important, if we get back to what we were talking about, distribution, fragmentation. It's really important that the user has everything that they need in just one binary.
Ah, okay. Plugin types or input, processor, filter, output. And I'm running out of space to write everything you need in one binary. I'm not sure I can. How about here? Everything you need in one binary. And that, when you say that, what you mean is it's one binary that you create and customize as a user. Or honestly, the ecosystem is so vast, you could probably find one binary that fits your particular use case. But one binary that puts these plugin types into one with Fluent Bit into one container image. That's what you mean by everything you need in one binary. Is that correct?
Yes. For example, imagine that you are a Splunk customer.
Uh-huh.
I'm in, for example, Amazon customer. We both can consume the same container image. We both can use the same binary to connect to our own needs and so.
Okay.
That's what, yeah, I don't need any customization because all this functionality for different outputs is already there.
Okay. So is like all these plugin types, are they each their own container image? Or are they all together make up a container image?
Okay, in the this is a question mostly about how do we distribute this. So Fluentd has a source code, which is a link that
Mm-hmm.
that we just pasted. That one in our CI system gets built, that's testing and everything. It creates a binary, which is the program, Fluentd itself, and that
Mm-hmm.
Fluentd is packaged as RPN for Fedora, for Debian, Ubuntu, where it gets packages, right? And gets also, we publish a container with this binary on it. So pretty much, you just go ahead and consume in the way that you want. If you're an Ubuntu user or Debian user, you want to grab the Debian packages, right?
Ah,
If you are in containers, you just grab our public container from Docker Hub. And actually,
okay.
Docker Hub, I think that we are over 14 billion downloads as of today.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's insane.
Wow. Cool. That's awesome. You've changed the world, Eduardo. The world is a different place now because you exist.
Oh, I like to be very honest that sometimes I'm kind of the public face of the project, but also I can tell you that 90% of the features that we have and stuff that we have in the project today is thanks to the
Hmm.
community. So their
Yeah.
ideas, their use cases, their feedback, because you can have a project, but if you don't have users and you don't listen to the users, You don't
Mhm.
have the feedback loop. And if you don't have the feedback loop, you don't have innovation. You don't have innovation,
Mhm.
you're no longer solving the problems that people have.
Mhm.
Right? And I
Yeah.
think that we have been really lucky from one side to be right on time in the right moment when this started,
Uh-huh.
and to be focused on that. I'm glad that at that time Treasure Data employ me and support all this work, right? Then, well, after Treasure Data, I was many years there. I created my own company, Calyptia, with my co-founder Anurag Gupta. We created a company. We built a bunch of commercial stuff on top of this. And yeah, last year we were acquired by Chronosphere, and Chronosphere continues supporting all this movement. So I think we have been
Ah,
lucky also to have all the support behind our backs, right? And users also has been really helpful on this. And actually, not everything is flowers and rainbows, right? We have tough days with bugs, system that something crashes, you have errors, and yeah, it's part of the software. Nothing is perfect. I think that the value of users when they choose Fluent is about responsiveness time. You can have bugs, but people doesn't care that if you have or you don't have them. It's about how fast can you fix it,
yeah. Yeah.
right? That's what they care about, right? And that's something that you learn over time. And yeah, for example, and to be really honest, this week we fixed the bug, the security bug 304, and somehow one PR, one contribution, we don't want to blame anybody, but it's like, hey, something broke this Splunk connector, and last night we
Oh,
had to ship another version, right? But
yeah.
yeah, hey, something failed in our process where we didn't validate, we didn't have one specific test for something. Hey, now we're working on
Uh-huh.
it to add that test so we don't get this regression in the future. But yeah, we really had so really happy that people is understand this type of things, right? At the end of the day, this is free software, it's a patch license,
Mhm.
but we take very seriously because we know that every line of code that we ship will be deployed on million of places. I'm talking million because we get million deployments every day. That's why we
Wow.
have 40 millions. So yeah, it's a lot of responsibility. It's not just myself. We have a ton of developers. AWS contribute to Fluent Bit, Oracle, Microsoft, Google. So we have engineering resources from different cloud providers, other companies also, hey, saying this is wrong, or I have this idea, I have this, new improvement. What do you think, guys, about it? And I'm glad to say that, yeah, this is really vendor agnostic solution, and that's what people are looking for.
This is awesome. So we're out of space on the board, but is there anything else, like any new information about Fluentd that you feel like you would like to share? And then,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, I have some news. Yeah. So we need to formalize this and also get some support from all the maintainers. This is a working process. It's like Fluentd has been the primary project of the CNCF for many, many years. But now with
Mhm.
the transition from cloud providers to Fluent Bit, and everybody almost new deployments going with Fluent Bit, we think that it's
Mhm.
time to make Fluent Bit the primary project of the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Actually, if you look at our GitHub handle, it's not Fluent, it's Fluent, because the organization
Uh-huh.
is called Fluent, and it was called
Ah,
Fluent D because hey, everything was called something with the letter D at the end, MySQL D or this service D, which means
uh-huh.
daemon.
This demon. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a
I
very
always thought
unique.
of it as distributed, but it's demon. That makes more sense. Got it.
Yeah, and that's well, and Fluent Bit becomes the name because it was bit, right? It's the concept of very granular things for embedded devices, like a bit, like a byte.
Ah,
That's
got
why
it.
it's Fluent Bit. It was lightweight. Actually, if you look at the logos, Fluent D is a pigeon. The logo is a
Uh-huh.
pigeon, while Fluent
Uh-huh.
Bit is a hummingbird, right? You also get this concept that yeah, it's
Ah,
faster, it's lightweight, it moves fast, right?
yeah.
And the pigeon comes regionally because pigeon used to be like messengers, right? So you
Okay.
put these messages, one to it flies, go to the other place. That's the concept behind those. But
Nice.
now
That's fun.
Fluent is like it's maintained, but
Uh-huh.
there's no much innovation in terms of supporting other protocols. I think that there's some architectural things that limits
Mm-hmm.
its scope for very intensive workloads, and that's why people has migrated to Fluent Bit. So we think that it's time to put Fluent Bit like the primary project. Well, at least I think it should be the primary project while we continue supporting both. But all the innovation,
Mm-hmm.
if you look at, for example, multiple support of telemetry data is in Fluent Bit.
Mm-hmm.
OTLP is in Fluent Bit. Most of the connectors are in Fluent Bit today.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And what else? Well, we are every year on every single KubeCon. That's our intention, thanks to the support of the companies that employ us, so every maintainer. So we were in KubeCon Europe this year in Paris, and now, well, we are looking forward to KubeCon US. And for folks that are around the conference, because I know that the US version is also a ton of people, we always try to do something very cool with the sponsor of the project. We try to make a new big release of Fluent Bit on every conference, but also we make
Oh.
a new T-shirt for every conference. It's like the
Oh.
Fluent T-shirt, and we try to come up with a very kind of Lollapalooza style with a brand of the place where this conference taking place. For example, I didn't wear that today, but I think that the gift video that we were working on, I was wearing that. The last
Uh-huh.
version of Paris, yeah, we have the Eiffel Tower, we have the Gioconda, and some very stuff from Paris with
So
KubeCon. So
how
and
how do those of us who go to KubeCon get your limited edition shirts?
yeah, oh, that's cool. That's limited edition. We give them for free. So we get the help from
Uh-huh.
sponsors. We try to print, I don't know, 900. So my goal is also, hey, let's try to cover at least 10% of the conference. If they're 10,000 and they have 1,000.
Cool.
So in the first way to get them is like, and maybe it's a bit of context. We used to run our conference FluentCon, and now it's called Observability Day. So we originally
Okay.
created an Observability Day conference that happens the first day of KubeCon, well, before the
Mm-hmm.
main, right? And that conference, we said we're going to invite other folks from observability, right? We
Uh-huh.
invite folks from OpenTelemetry, from Prometheus, from Jaeger. So we try to have our own instance to talk about the stuff that we like, right? Right? And and that conference, we give these t-shirts for free. So if you are
Cool.
around, you will see us, right? And pretty much I will be wearing that, and we'll people from the Fluent community with these t-shirts. Now, if you are in KubeCon the next days, right? Go to there's one area that is called the
Project Pavilion.
Projects
Yes.
Pavilion. Projects Pavilion. So there we have the what is called the Fluentd and Fluent Bit booth, right? And in there we will always have t-shirts. Yeah, we don't give
Okay.
all of them the first day, otherwise it's crazy. So we try to give 200. So distribute them. But we're really happy to ship you one. So if you can send me your mailing address, so happy to send you one once we have the new design ready.
Amazing. That's so cool. Absolutely. Um, if you feel finished with new fluency knowledge, the way I'd like to close this out, what I want to do is repeat to you everything I learned today. So I'm going to do a quick summary of everything that's on the board, and you can correct me if anything's wrong. I insist on it. Does that sound
Look,
good?
sounds perfect.
Excellent. Okay. So observability is an outcome. It's an experience. It's being able for your users to see what they want to see when they want to see it. And it involves collecting, rooting, and analyzing data. Deshaun's here. Thanks for being here, Deshaun. Deshaun gives his seal of approval. Nice to see you, friend. So, one thing that I deeply didn't understand going into this was Fluentd versus Fluent Bit. So first we started by telling the story chronologically. So Fluentd exists predates Kubernetes. The problem that existed that Fluentd was created to solve was that we had many different sources of data, and all those sources had their own protocol. And we had many different storage backends for data, all of which had their own different ways of connecting in protocol. And so Fluentd was created to be a layer between these two, the sources and the destinations, and standardize how data is received from sources and sent to backends. So it uses, even Fluentd uses an extensible plugin system. It can process data before it's sent to the backend. It's written in Ruby, and and it's still maintained today, but there's not a lot of innovation in the Fluentd space. But we have distributed systems started to exist like Kubernetes that made the Fluentd problem compounded, because not only are we worried about so many sources and so many syncs, but we're also worried about all the different nodes. Where because of that, and because of IoT, which stands for Internet of Things, of edge devices, there became people needed a lighter weight version of Fluentd. So that's why Fluent Bit was created in the first place, to be a lightweight version that could be run on edge devices. And it's written in C as opposed to Ruby, because C is more performant. But then Fluent Bit evolved. So now it can handle lots of data more performantly, partly because of the distributed system Kubernetes issue. It evolved where it needs to handle a lot of data performantly. And then Fluent Bit just generally became the next generation of Fluentd. So all the innovation now is happening as part of the Fluent Bit project. But the two different projects work well together. Fluent Bit's the predominant project that's used in Kubernetes architectures and distributed architectures, and so much so that all the major managed offerings of the cloud providers use Fluent Bit for logs. And but even though Fluent Bit was designed for logs, it can also now do metrics and tracing too. So, in summary of this part of it, Fluentd is the log collector and processor. It's open source software, it's CNCF graduated, it's vendor neutral. But then Fluent Bit is the evolved version. It's a lightweight telemetry agent for logs, metrics, and traces. And they work together. I'll restate that part. So then we started to talk about open telemetry. So open telemetry is a standardization for how telemetry data is collected, transported, and delivered. It uses something called the OTLP protocol. The P stands for protocol. OTel, open telemetry, is abbreviated OTel. OTel has an implementation called an open telemetry collector. So that has receivers, it has processors, it has an exporter. So it does something very similar to Fluent Bit specifically. So then we talked about, okay, what's open telemetry versus Fluent Bit? So to be clear, both are very good tools. Fluent Bit is written to optimize resource consumption in a way open telemetry is not. Both support the open telemetry OTLP protocol, but Fluent Bit also works with the Fluentd protocol, which is called forward. So Fluent Bit, if you have been collecting logs for a long time and your system use Fluentd, then Fluent Bit's going to be able to support that. The OTel collector, the open telemetry collector, is better for traces, but both are good for metrics. And then Fluent Bit has better resource consumption for logs. It's more efficient. And then Fluent Bit can also, when you make your own open telemetry collector, you're designing your own thing from scratch. And when you do that, you have a problem called fragmentation, where each part that you, when you're adding everything, even though it's standardized, when you're putting it together in your own custom way, then you've made something brand new that you now have to maintain and update. And so Fluent Bit is easier to maintain because it solves this defragmentation problem by having popular plugins are already integrated and maintained into images and maintained by the Fluent Bit project. So you mentioned like a big bug that just happened last week, and then Fluent Bit is on it and rolling out stuff, as opposed to if you're using open telemetry, that would be a you problem. You, the viewer, not you, Eduardo. Eduardo has the Fluent Bit maintenance is an Eduardo problem. So another thing, so that's about, in terms of the managed offerings of the major cloud providers, they use Fluent Bit for logs, and they do use open telemetry for traces. So they use both. Then we talked about Fluent Bit's plugins a little bit. So Fluent Bit plugins, they're easy to consume. You've done as much as you can to abstract away any complexity. You can write your own plugins in Go, as WASM modules, and in Lua language. And then we talked about plugin types. So you have input plugins to connect to a source and receive data, processor plugins, which are new, which do like filtering and processing, but in a more performant way than the filter plugins, which are the older version. And then we have output plugins to connect to a backend. Do you want to say, I haven't given you a chance to speak. Is everything good so far?
This is perfect.
Okay, great. And so one more thing, the last thing we talked about is Fluent Bit processing capabilities. So we talked about an example use case where a business needs to obfuscate a credit card number, but the way it's obfuscated is different depending on what the credit card number is. For example, like whether it's Visa or MasterCard or whatever. So we just talked about a use case basically where a particular business needs to integrate their own custom logic into their data pipeline. So they need this processor element to be able to do their own custom logic. So FluentBit created a filter using the Lua language, Lua, and Lua language is both lightweight and easy to use. So basically, with this, companies could add the Lua code to their data pipeline to add that company specific logic. So the processing capabilities also do distributed processing. Bit runs as a data set, and it also now does multi-threaded processing with this new processor filter. And that's all I have. How's that? That's
That's
Fluentd and
perfect.
Fluent Bit.
Yeah, this is the first intro that yeah that they help that you build very great in 1 hour and 40 minutes. That's been great. You
I
got it. You
couldn't
got
do
it.
it alone. It's a team effort. It's a community effort. It has to do with great questions from chat. It has to do with you being amazing. I'm just a conduit in an empty vessel. So thank you so much, Eduardo, for being a guest today. Let's add one more thing before we close. Will you say if someone wants to learn more or ask questions or get involved, what would be a good thing for them to do? I can.
Yes, this is a tricky question where you say, send me a DM, send me an email, write me on Slack, and yeah, it's hard. You know, we
Uh-huh.
have. I will tell you where the challenge that we have, right?
Uh-huh.
Before saying I will be able for every single person that writes me because it's we are very overwhelmed. But usually,
Yes.
for example, if you have any bug, any problem, open in the nation
Mhm.
GitHub is the way to go. But also you can point out that bug in or comments question on the Slack. That will be really helpful. They have a lot of community members that are always in Slack starting their
And
day. I'll help you to ask and to answer
and
questions or at least give some guides.
and when you say Slack, Fluent Bit has their own dedicated Slack. It's not part of the CNCF Slack, right?
So we have a channel on the CNCF Slack, but since a project has many areas, we have Fluentd, we
Uh-huh.
have Fluent, we have people from Kubernetes. So we have our own Slack. That's where most of things happen. So
Okay.
I give to you, yeah, in the Fluent Bit website, if you go in the top right corner, you will find a link to our Slack, to the Fluent Slack. Actually, it's
Perfect.
called Fluent-all, right? And there you have a channel
Uh-huh.
for Fluent, for Fluent Bit and other stuff. And people create their own channels too.
Perfect. Well, thank
Yeah.
you so much for sharing your time. I'm going to start the music again.
And before the music, can I do an invitation? Oh,
Give
sorry.
me an
Yeah.
invitation.
Yes, totally forgot about it. So we were talking about KubeCon US, right?
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
today we called for papers for Observability Day, which is a conference that we
Ah.
run. All from Prometheus, Open Telemetry, and Jaeger is open. So as we were talking, that people tend to think that they have nothing to share or teach others, and actually everybody has something. Actually, if you have struggled with observability, or you have use case, or learn how you overcome certain challenges as an end user, is really helpful for submit your experience to this track observability day, right? Don't think that everybody who speaks or is in front of the camera, we are huge experts, right? We all have struggles. That's how we learn, right? And
Uh-huh.
sharing those stuff like shortcuts for people helps a lot. So I would like to invite everybody to participate in observability day. Take a look at what have you learned, you have learned recently, and maybe that can be a full presentation and will add ton of value. So yeah, Observability Day has been growing a lot. In the last, we started with one room. We were pretty small, 50 people, 200, 300. And in KubeCon in Europe, we got two rooms packed. I don't know how many people. We got more than 500, right? For
Wow.
US, I don't know what will happen, but always we're getting more people trying to contribute in terms of, hey, I would like to share my experience about this technology or something that I'm building that connects to this in an open source way, not vendor speech, right? That will be really helpful. So the call for papers is open, and go to the Kubernetes, to the KubeCon website, and you will see that the call for papers for not just Observability Day, but also other co-located events, it's available. So, hey, just give it a try.
Give it a go. Yeah. And also when the co-located events are now, if you if you get accepted to speak, you get a whole pass to all of KubeCon. And so that's a really cool opportunity. And also they're open in such a way. It used to be like when you signed up for KubeCon, you had to be like, okay, I want to go to Platform Engineering Day enough, and therefore you got Platform Engineering Day was on your badge, and you could not go to any other co-located events. But now it's just like you get yes co-located, and then you can go to any co-located events and jump all around, and it's tons of fun.
Yeah,
So
that's great.
yeah.
Actually, one of I remember that because people were forced. Well, you have to pay extra to go to Colo Days.
Yep.
There's
Uh-huh.
limited space, so you have to sign up for that if you plan to attend. That's number one. And I think that
Yeah.
the positive things for attendees, like as you can say, you can jump between every session. And for
Yeah.
us, it's more interesting work because we want to retain you in our track, right? So we want to create the best content for you. And
Uh-huh.
yeah, we don't want you just to go to 10 events. Just go to one and get everything that you want and to learn and get better, get experience,
That's
and
awesome.
and the conference is not just about tracks. I think that's really good about networking. Hey, just meeting new people, working the
Yeah.
same stuff than you. It's really
Yeah.
good.
It's the best. So yeah, submit to speak. Come hang out with us at KubeCon in Salt Lake City in November. Thank you so much, Eduardo. I
Thank you.
appreciate your time and expertise. Thanks everyone in the chat.
Take
Yeah.
care.
Thanks
Thank you.
so much for reporting. Bye.
Bye bye.
You can dance a little with me, Eduardo. Take it. Yeah.